Okay. Morning, everybody. Hope y'all's days are going good. I know a bus broke down waiting for people to come in, but it's fine. How's y'all's first day? In the varsity lab. Good? What y'all go over? Raise up hands. I don't want everybody talking over.
Just case and DA.
Case and disad. What lab are you? Devin? Okay, somebody from Joel's lab. What'd y'all go over? Same thing? Okay, Barkman's lab, what'd y'all go over?
We did, well, as I said earlier, some card cutting, bit of research, and then we went over like spreading. So he had everyone come up to the front and then just do their best to spread. And then as they, did their thing, he gave them, he gave us suggestions.
Okay, so Barkman's lab, this will probably be a recap of what y'all learned yesterday, maybe with some added tips of how to research. But for everybody else, it seems like research is still something that hasn't been covered. So something else I want to know is level of newness to varsity. How many of y'all is this like your first time doing anything varsity related in the lab? Okay. How many of y'all have been to at least 2 varsity tournaments? 3? 4? 5? All right, cool. So this is a relatively new lab. How many of y'all have cut your own cards before, made your own files? All right. A couple of hands, but the majority of you have not. So this lecture is going to be about how to research, how to find those useful cards, and how to construct files and arguments together to make it so that you're not relying on other people's work, such as LAMDL files, open evidence, the wiki, etc. So before we start off with any research tips, I do want to explain why research is necessary. First, it is the key to success. You're not going to be successful relying on solely other people's files that people cut, because that takes time and effort, and that time and effort goes into you learning the actual subject, right? When you highlight files, like for example at this camp, or when you highlight files that are given to you, you're not learning like the nitty-gritty details of every single argument that is being made inside each article. You're just taking away the main points of what somebody else underlined, boldened, right? Formatted for you to pay more attention to. But cutting your own cards, researching your own articles will allow you to dive deep into the warrants that is inside each argument being made, inside each article that you find. But I'm not gonna lie, research is also very, very time consuming. It takes hours of reading, and you're gonna have multiple brain crashes at times. But the key thing you need to know is that patience is key, and that sometimes you'll take back from research nothing at all. Sometimes you will take back a bunch of things. It is a process, not necessarily an event that happens and then you immediately get everything. It is sort of something you learn over time. It is detailed specific searches. It is exhausting every search necessary. And oftentimes, research makes or breaks debate or debates. It can either win you or lose you a crucial debate. The reason is that sometimes it doesn't matter how good an argument is on a substantive level. Researching is what helps you get ahead of the curve, because it not only helps you become experts on certain topics, but sometimes you cut arguments that nobody has read before, and therefore when you go into the round, your opponent doesn't have any arguments against it. They take a lot of prep time. They're trying to figure out on the spot, what are you trying to say? And by the time they get a semblance of an idea of what you have said with the new research you have done, you're already steps ahead of them because you have preempted their arguments with more research. So I'll give you an example of this really bad argument I made my senior year of high school, but I had an 100% win rate on it whenever I was negative. I never lost. So my senior year was 2019 to 2020. The high school topic was whether or not the US should reduce their weapon sales to foreign countries. One of the most popular apps in LAMDL was a Saudi Arabia app, that we should cut our weapon sales to Saudi Arabia. There were a couple advantages, but the common disadvantage that you heard against that app was a relations disad. That if we cut off arms sales to Saudi Arabia, they'll cut off their oil that they sell to us. Oil prices and gas prices will hike up in the economy. Economic decline results in nuclear war. Yada, yada, yada. That was a common disad against that affirmative. I cut a disad that said that if we cut our arms sales to Saudi Arabia, they will pull out of their investment in the Silicon Valley. Uber is going to crash. Uber's economy, or Uber's stock market share, is key to the California economy. California economy key to the US economy. Decline in the US economy equals nuclear war. I got my impact. Now, That is a long series chains of events that do not make any sense if you actually pick apart what my evidence is saying. But because my opponents did not do their research against the specific cards that I cut about the US economy, about Uber, even if they said it in their speeches, they did not have as much evidence as I did. So it's like my research was able to beat them even though I read a bad argument. Now, I'm not incentivizing y'all to read bad arguments. I'm incentivizing y'all to use competitive strategies whenever you go to tournaments. All right. Sometimes we feel as though going into varsity means you have to be experts in everything. While that is partly true, a lot of it also has to do with getting the edge on your opponents. Right. Debate is also a game. It is also about how much research you can introduce. Right. Being able to be unpredictable, things like that. Research is not taking files from open evidence and calling it your own because you were able to highlight it a different color. It's not taking evidence from the wiki, and it is not just highlighting cards or just reading what cards that people give you. It is reading articles. Even if your coaches give you a card that they cut that they think is really good, or you have somebody else on your team that cut a card that they think is really good, one of the first things you should be thinking about is clicking on the URL that is in the site so you can read the article for yourself. Because sometimes people format cards in a way that says something, but then when you actually read the article, it says something else. But that is a skill that you can only get, being able to know what things actually say when you do actual research. So with all that being said, we're going to get into actual research tips. So roadmap for this lecture. We're going to learn how to search the research process. Then there's a grind set mindset process in the middle. And then the third part is actually cutting the cards, which is actually, in my opinion, the easiest part of research. So the search portion is going to be key terms to use when researching, places you can search from. The grind set mindset is going to be how to read articles in a lot faster ways, and also different types of qualifications / warrants for arguments that you'll hear whenever reading an article. And then the last part is cutting a card. I'll talk a little bit about verbatim, and then I'll show y'all how I cut a card. And then after I'm done with these slides, it's very few slides, I'll show you my whole process into cutting cards. And so I'll just show you like doing an exercise that I do. All right, we're going to start off with the first part. Search, key terms to use. First thing I want to remind y'all is when you are looking for an argument on Google or anywhere else, I want you to search in key terms, not sentences. The reason I'm saying that is that, for example, if I want to research why economic decline leads to nuclear war, me personally, I'm not going to type a sentence that says economic decline leads to nuclear war. The reason is that when you're using a search engine, it is searching for every single one of those words, and you're going to get a lot of articles that say nothing. Because when you search why economic decline leads to nuclear war, Google is trying to give you an article that says that exact sentence, or something close to it. Instead, what I want you to use is key terms. So I'll explain what each of these mean. If you're a bit confused after this slide, it is okay. I'm going to show y'all how I use them, and then hopefully you get it when I'm actually practicing these. So some of the key terms you can use whenever searching is quotation marks. So when you put a word inside quotation marks in the Google search engine, or just any search engine in general, it shows you articles that say that exact word or phrase that you're looking for. So instead of saying why economic decline leads to nuclear war, I would instead say, quote, economic decline, and then I would put in something else that I am looking for. That is the first part of this. Second one is and in all caps when you're using Google or any search engine. When you put and in all caps, it shows you articles with multiple words and phrases that you're looking for. So for example, again, turning the sentence why economic decline leads to nuclear war to economic decline and nuclear war. That way, you're going to get a bunch of articles that say those exact words instead of Google trying to show you an article that says the exact sentence, why economic decline leads to nuclear war. It gives you more efficient searches, and I'm going to show you how to parse out through articles that say exactly what you want to say when we get into the exercise. The third part of key terms is or in all caps. Let's say there's multiple ways to say economic decline. What are multiple ways? I know the economic downturn is here, but what are other ways we can say economic decline? Good?
Economic depression.
Depression, yes. What else?
Recession.
Recession, yes. What else? Financial crash. Boom and bust cycles. Things like that, right? Developing a word bank. So you can say economic decline or economic downturn or financial crash. You can make it as big as you want, small as you want. Doesn't matter. As long as you're using these key terms, the articles are going to show you what you want. Sometimes you're going to find nothing, and it just means you need to refine your search, right? Sometimes you're using too many key terms, and you might need to parse it down a little bit. And then the last one, I don't really use this one whenever researching. I only use it as sort of a last resort. Usually I use the quotation marks, the and the ors the most. I rarely use the asterisk one, but this asterisk one, it shows results for articles that have a similar word tree. So for example, whenever I do research for college, I try to figure out what the connection is to the college topic and Latina communities in particular. So what I do is, instead of trying to search like Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latina, I instead just put Latin and then asterisk. The reason I do that is because it's going to give me articles that have words that say Latin and always end with something else. So it'll give me articles that go from Latina, Latino, Latinx, Latina, right? I don't have to type all of those in individually because the asterisk allows the word tree to develop by itself, right? If I'm trying to find a critique for racial capitalism, instead of typing capitalism, I would probably just put capitalist, something right there, and then after that I would put the asterisk and it would give me stuff like capitalistic, capitalism, right? Different word trees, different words that branch off from that initial spelling. But again, this is sort of a last resort thing because instead what you can do is just use either quotation marks or and. Or to get more broad searches, sometimes you don't use quotation marks at all. If you're looking for things that are related to economic decline and nuclear war but don't exactly say those words, you can just do economic decline and nuclear war without the quotation marks. You can do it in multiple ways, but it all depends on your preference. So this is an example that I put at the bottom of showing you how you can use key terms to search for certain things instead of sentences. So an example, quote, economic decline or quote, economic downturn and nuclear war. So to break that down, what it's going to show me is, it's going to show me articles that both talk about economic decline and nuclear war, but the or lets me find articles that say either economic decline and nuclear war or economic downturn and nuclear war. I'm searching for multiple combinations here. And again, as you develop your word bank, you can replace these words with something else like recession, financial crash. What are other ways we can say nuclear war? We could just put war as well. What are other ways? Whenever we think of nuclear war, what else do we think of? Do we think of just two countries fighting together? What event would take place? Go ahead.
World War?
Yeah, World War III, for example. Yeah. So use different words, develop your word bank, but again, that only happens when you do research. Another thing you might think of is that something that usually comes in my head is whenever I'm trying to search for a new topic or trying to learn about a new topic, my word bank or like the key terms that are inside that certain field is very limited. So usually I start off with a general term, like for example, if I'm trying to learn about the way economic decline leads to nuclear war, I'll start off with economic decline. But as I read articles, I'll see that people are using different terms, like downturn, boom and bust, etc. You develop that word bank, you take note of it, and that allows you to expand and refine your searches to find more things that you're looking for. Hello everybody, take a seat, take a seat. Alright, I'll pause right now. While everybody's getting settled down, are there any questions about this slide? I'll give y'all time to think about it. If not, we'll just wait for them to get settled. Are y'all coming from the bus that broke down?
No, our bus did not break.
Oh.
We picked up them.
Yeah, we picked up the people.
Okay, y'all picked up the bus who broke down. Okay. Alright, for the people that are just sitting down, don't worry, we'll go over this slide again because I have sort of an activity at the end. And then you'll see how I'm using these terms. If you want to take a quick picture right now, that's fine. But I'll wait for y'all to get settled down. If you look on the schedule, this is a research lecture. So to give a quick summary, all of these are key terms that you can use in your searches. You want to search in key terms, not sentences, because it allows you to get more refined searches in. And you'll see how that works when I show you an example of me doing research for myself. Alright, gonna move on to the next slide. Okay, second part of the search process. You gotta figure out places to search from. Before we get into any of these three, you always want to start with a general Google search first. I don't want you going to any scholarly journal before before you go to Google general search, always start off with a general search, just regular Google. Always start off with that. The reason is because if you try to go to scholarly articles first and you're trying to research a topic that you're not familiar with yet, you're going to get a lot of jargon that you are confused with. But instead, a Google search gives you articles that people publish that aren't necessarily peer reviewed or aren't necessarily full of like academic jargon that you don't understand yet, right? These articles are a lot more simplified. They're allowing you to understand and dive into the concept before, you have to memorize all these words and what they mean. So always start off with a general Google search first. After, if you feel as though the articles you are searching in that general Google search are not giving you the arguments that you need, like you need more, for example, like statistics-backed studies to make sure that your evidence is qualified and all that, you can start looking for scholarly articles, and there are multiple places that you can look from. The first one is Google Scholar. I'll take y'all through a journey of how to use Google Scholar. Google Scholar, different version of Google, it gives you peer-reviewed journals, it gives you more studies that are corroborated by certain people, right? People in the academic field, professors, for example. You can also use journals/databases such as Sage, Project Muse, Springer, Taylor and Francis. All of these are these are honestly like debate famous databases that people use a lot, but you can find a lot more databases and journals when you use Google Scholar, because when you search for articles on Google Scholar, it's going to show you what database/journal it's coming from, and I'll show you where to look for that. But for right now, Google Scholar, journals, databases such as these. And then the third one is special issues. So special issues are certain sections inside databases that cover an extremely niche topic. Who here thinks fiscal redistribution is a niche topic? And I mean, there's people who are dedicated to it, so there's bound to be some special issues. So what I mean by that is there are usually like databases solely dedicated to analyzing the economy, right? In those databases, they will put out special issues from like time to time, like either every 3 months, every 6 months, they'll cover a unique particular issue. And for example, in those economy databases, you might find a special issue that is solely dedicated to studying fiscal redistribution, to studying UBI, federal jobs guarantee. And I'll show you how to find those as well. But those are other places that you can look from. Jason, am I missing any place for scholarly articles?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Second place, or after you look for scholarly articles, you might find that a lot of these are either locked behind a paywall, or you need to have a university account in order to get these articles, which means all you high schoolers are at a disadvantage, RIP, oh well. But there are ways that you can find it for free, most of them. You can go through certain search engines that will give you these things for free, such as Sci-Hub, LibGen, Z-Library, which just got back online. It was taken down for a little bit, but it is back online. You just need to make an account. I promise it will not give you no virus. Your computer will not break down. But at the same time, I can't verify that because I have a MacBook, not a Windows computer. L to those who have Windows computers. Who here has heard of Sci-Hub? All right, couple hands. I'll show you what it looks like. Who has heard of LibGen? All right, college person doesn't. Matthew has heard of LibGen. You got one person. All right, zlib. Okay, a couple people. Academia.edu. A couple people. All right, so y'all know generally what I'm talking about. There are places to find these things for free, and these places sometimes demand certain things from you. So, for example, Sci-Hub will demand what's called a DOI in order to get you access to the article. I'll show you where to find those. LibGen, sometimes LibGen gives you books for free. It's not articles, it's books. So Sci-Hub is like the place to get articles for free. LibGen is the place to get books for free. Zlib, books for free. Academia.edu, articles for free. There's also another place. It's called, and I forgot to put it down, so I'm gonna make sure y'all write this down. Archive.md. Archive.md. What archive.md is if, for example, you want to cut a card from LA Times, Wall Street Journal, right? Places that are like websites or journals but are locked behind a paywall because you need to have like a monthly subscription to those places. Archive.md, as long as you have the URL to that article, if you plug it inside archive.md, it gives you it for free. Hopefully, most of the time. The other place is 12foot.io. So 12ft.io. Also gives you website journal articles for free. Archive.md, 12ft.io. And then the last place is make friends with the people who are in your lab. Some of them will have certain access to things or already have the article or book that you're looking for. So make friends, make sure that you ask people if there's a way that they can get it for you. But most importantly, a lot of schools at this point, and if you don't have college alumni yet, you can take down my email and then I can help you get articles. You can ask college people who are in LAMDL, either LAMDL alumni or just college people who are here to spend time with y'all and make sure that y'all get better at debate. You can email us and ask if we can help you to get these articles because we know how to use these things. We do it a lot for college. I know I do because as much as like Devin, my coach, likes to think Cal State Long Beach is a good library with good resources, does not. I went to the library one time to actually try to find articles in person or books in person. Every single one is like 1950s and like older. It's not useful. I'm in the same boat as y'all most of the time. So, ask friends, ask college people if you're having trouble finding certain articles. If we don't have it, we usually have college friends who do have resources to get you it. There are also, is everybody here from LAUSD? Or are there certain people who went to charter school? Damn, okay, I don't know the way charter schools work. But I know LAUSD gives you access to research databases like EBSCO Publishing. So you can use that as well to get access to certain articles. Other place, and this is sort of my last resort just because it's like, it's hot, it's the summer, I don't really like driving places, and at the same time, I got things to do. But last resort, go to your public library. The reason is that if you can't find the book online, you can ask the library to order it for you, and then you can lend it from the library. If you need it that bad, right? If you want to cut an article out of it or a card out of it, if you want to read a book that you think is really important to study for this topic, go to the public library. Even if they don't have it in stock, they can order it for you. You can borrow it and then you return it, right? The other thing that's cool about libraries from what I've seen is that, for example, at my local library, they have a special center dedicated to Native American studies, and it's an entire room dedicated to it. I don't know if most public libraries have that, but there are certain libraries that do have those things and allows you to study certain literature in depth. And then libraries are also a quiet place to travel. They have study rooms. If y'all don't have AC in your house, you can do that. I don't have AC in my house. My thing's broken. Yeah.
Hey, I have a question. If we were to cut a card from a book, like in person that we can't find online, do we just type it in without a URL? Or?
Yeah. So if you can't find the book online, usually you can like copy the link to the book online to show them like what book you're cutting from, right? Because usually like publishers have an online website. So for example, Haymarket Books is a publishing company that publishes books. Even if you can't find the book for free online, you would still, in your sites when you're cutting your card, link them to that. So they know like that's the place that published the book.
On that website, you should be able to find a DOI, and you could also take the DOI and link it in your citation when you're using a physical book.
Yeah, and I'll show y'all what a DOI is. But yeah. Other thing that I like to do whenever I research is that, specifically when it comes to K literature, again, a lot of the concepts introduced in K literature are dense and need a lot of time to just sit down, break it down, study it, learn it, etc. I really like going to YouTube sometimes just to like help explain certain things. Sometimes reading is not it for me. Like my eyes get tired, my brain gives out. But YouTube is a really cool place to get either very simplified versions of what argument you're trying to read, or it helps, like for example, there are a lot of professors who publish their presentations at certain colleges online, and so those presentations are really helpful for me because oftentimes a professor that I want to cut a book from to cut like a critique, for example, usually gives lectures on the book that they wrote. So that is also helpful as well because oftentimes, the reading the book, some people learn different, not a lot of people learn from reading, other people are more like auditory learners. Always adapt to your learning style. So these are all places to search from. All right, next part of research, mindset, how to read. So when you research, and you're gonna see me do this, I go through a lot of articles, like to try to find just one good article to cut a card from. Oftentimes, my tab page on my laptop goes from 5 tabs to 100 really quick. And the reason that happens is because, again, I'm looking through every single website possible and I'm trying to figure out which one is the one that I need in order to cut a card. And in order to parse through 100 different tabs, you're going to need to learn how to read quickly and be able to learn how to figure out which ones you need, which ones you don't pretty quick. First thing that I like to do is an eye test. Control F. Control F the words that you were looking for. If they're in there, cool. You can move on to the second step. Bless you.
Sorry.
You're good. If the words that you were looking for are not in there, chances are it's probably not an article you need. Or usually what I do is, if it doesn't pass the eye test, I read through like maybe the first 2 paragraphs and the final 2 paragraphs to learn like the intro and the conclusion. If I don't see the main points of what I'm trying to look for in the article, I move on. Because I know that there are 100 more articles that probably get to the point that I'm trying to make a lot faster. So, eye test, Control F, the words that you're looking for. Second thing, look for the abstract / main points at the top of an article for the general summary and decide from there if you want to continue reading or not. Sometimes when you're searching for a certain thing, you're gonna get perspectives from both sides, and you might find articles that disagree with the point you're trying to make. You might find articles that agree with the stuff that you are trying to make. The fastest way to figure this out, if this is an article worth reading in its entirety, is looking at the abstract. Does anybody know what I mean when I say abstract? Who doesn't know what an abstract is? I'm going to explain. All right, abstracts. In articles, for example, in scholarly articles, before the actual article starts, there's an abstract, which is just a general summary of what the article is going to say. It is an introduction to the topic that they're discussing, and then the conclusions that they drew from either a study that they did or from observations that they did. It is a general summary. Usually in that abstract, the main point is, given. If that main point doesn't line up with what you were trying to cut, then there's no need to read the article, right? If you think that it is still useful, then obviously eye test, you can find certain paragraphs where, the words pop up, and if those paragraphs were useful to cut, you will cut them. But, usually the abstract is the part that's the cutoff for me. If it doesn't sound interesting, or if it's not related to the things that I'm trying to get at for an argument, I just move on. And the third thing is patience. You got to read through every article you think is necessary. Even though I start with 5 tabs, end up with 100, I'm still going to narrow it down to like 30, and that is still a lot, right? Reading those articles takes time, and you need to be able to set aside time for you to read those things. You can't just like speed read, because, for example, one of the common issues for me is that if I try to speed read something, I may be reading the words, but my mind is not clicking with the words I'm reading. I think it's one of like the issues that I've gotten from spreading, where it's like you spread so fast that you're not thinking about the words that you're saying, right? Same thing happens to me when I'm reading. Sometimes I just like blank out. Like I know I'm reading, but I have no idea what's happening, right? So that's something that you gotta figure out. Learn at what pace you read through. I am an extremely slow reader. Like sometimes, like for example, the first time I tried to learn Afro-pessimism as an argument, and I was reading Frank Wilderson's book, it took me 6 hours to get through the first 30 pages. And I still didn't know what he said, so I had to read it again, right? Again, so it's like you have to read at your own pace. And then at the same time, there are certain articles that are going to take 6 hours to read, others that are 10 pages long and you can get through in 30 seconds because you're already familiar with the topic. It all depends at what pace and at what, process you are at learning these things. So patience is key. Read through every article you think is necessary, right? If it takes you a long time to read it, it's going to take a long time to read it. Okay. Second thing about grind set mindset, you also want to look for the different types of qualifications or warrants that people are making inside the articles that they are writing to support the arguments that they are making inside the article. So these are a bunch of different ones. I'm not going to explain what any of these mean. I just want you to know that these are terms that you're going to hear either in the abstract or when they're talking about their studies. I use quantitative research to justify my argument that economic decline leads to nuclear war. Through statistics, we can see that UBI would help millions of people out of the poverty line. A sociological standpoint reveals that the tax system is actually racialized and segregated along the color line, right? You're going to hear these words, and you're going to have to learn what these words mean. I don't have time to explain every single one, which is why when you hear these things like I use this, or studies that rely on X thing corroborate my analysis that blah, blah, blah. right? When you hear these key terms, you gotta, like, it's not, you can't just brush through them. You gotta figure out what they mean because those are the warrants behind your arguments, right? It's, for example, why some tags say studies prove or X example proves, right? One of them is a case study. They looked at a specific instance or a certain court case, and then they derived their conclusions from that. These are all different types of qualifications. And again, I'm not expecting you to write any of these down. If you are, cool, but just know that these are going to pop up a lot. The last part is what I want you to write down: author qualifications, because you're going to need to put them in your citation whenever you create a card. Your authors are not just random people most of the time. Sometimes they are, but most of the time they should not be. You should have qualifications for why your author is an expert on this topic, because sometimes cross-ex questions can be as simple as, who cares about Smith 11 writing about the economy, right? To be able to reference why Smith is a credible author, for example, you're going to write something in your tagline which is known as the qualifications part of it. And what that looks like is either the date is enough of a qualification itself. If you're cutting, for example, a uniqueness update for a dishad, right? For the economy dishad, you're going to need a lot of uniqueness arguments for why the economy is stable now. And so you're going to need a lot of cards that are recent, from last week, from this month, very recent. If you have a card that says the economy is stable now and it's written in 1929, who cares, you know, right? Other things too is that if you're talking about the economy, you're going to need someone who has either experience working in sort of the sector of studying the economy or working within some form of field, or they have a current job that analyzes the economy. They're a research analyst, for example. But the only way you know that is that when you read those articles, you're not just reading the articles, you're also researching the author as well. What is their past experience? Why are they qualified to speak on that certain subject? If you find nothing, then hopefully your author is referencing other studies, because that means that they probably don't have anything unique to offer, but they are probably doing research for themselves and then compiling it in an article. All right. Before we move into the part where you see me cutting cards and stuff, last thing about the grind set mindset is you are not doing research by yourself. Even though a lot of research is individual reading, research is a team effort. It does not matter if you cut the best dishad ever if your partner can't go for it in the 2NR and you're not the 2N, right? Or, for example, let's say you are the 2NR. You've cut the best dishad ever, but your partner, who is the 1NC, can't answer questions in cross-sex. That sets you up at a disadvantage. Your partner's going to get low speaks, you might get high speaks, but what if you lose one round and you don't break at the LAMDL tournament, even though you had the best dishad ever? Research is a team effort. You and your partner should be on the same page. Even if your partner is not reading every single article that you have read, you should be able to give them an explanation of what the argument means in a simple manner so they are able to understand the argument, and then after that they can read your files and figure out what it is saying. Routine team update should be a thing. How many of y'all come from a team of more than 4 people? Cool. 10? 15?
Probably.
Is that Harvard Senior Prep?
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all got 15. All right. So yeah, routine team update should be a thing. Because if not, you're gonna have people falling behind. You're gonna have one person that's ahead, and that's usually not good for team stuff. Set deadlines for yourself. Usually what I like to do is I set deadlines that I can't meet. So for example, in a week, this week I told myself I would read 2 books. I'm like 30 pages into the first one, and it's Tuesday, right? I know I'm not going to read 2 books because I got a lesson plan for lectures. I have to teach my lab, right? I got to drive home. I got to shower. I got to do other things. Pet my dog, I'm not going to have time to read 2 books. But the reason I like setting those deadlines that I can't meet is because for me, it lets me stay motivated. It always tells me that there's something to do. It's not necessarily me falling behind. I don't look at it that way because then you're setting up yourself to be extremely exhausted. But you always want to find something to do. Research is never done. And then you should also be able to multitask. For the first few times you're in varsity and for the first times you're learning how to cut a file, I don't expect you to be able to cut 3 disheads at the same time. Or cut a counterplan and then also cut a new app at the same time, right? That's why you set certain tasks for your team to do to make sure the effort is spread out. But as you become more experienced, you're able to do multiple things at the same time because you're able to like retain more information, you become more knowledgeable on certain topics, and you should be able to multitask by the time you have a year's worth of experience cutting a file. Alright. I think that's it. So, we're going to get into the part where y'all just see me researching. But before we do that, are there any questions about research? Cool. It is 11:33, so I'll try to make this as quick as possible. So, I have a couple of notes on my phone that I need to follow while I do this. Actually, you know what? So, let's go through the first example. Economic decline leads to nuclear war. So if I wanted to cut a card, an impact card that says economic decline leads to nuclear war, some of my first searches, economic decline and nuclear war. You can see that I've already tried this, so it's going to be a little bit scripted. But for example, there's a bunch of different things, but what I'm really looking for when I search this up is, if you see in these Google searches, I don't know if the projector will work this much, but do you see the part right here where nuclear is more bolden than the other sentences?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So this is a quick intro to this article that Google gave me. It's not the full article, obviously, but it is showing me the key parts of the article that tell me here's where you're going to find that search term. So in here, I see a nuclear exchange of the magnitude reported, rapid collapse of the nation's social and economic infrastructure. To me, there's two things that stand out. First, I don't think it's making the argument that I want to make because the title itself says it. It says the consequences of nuclear war. So this one is saying nuclear war would lead to economic decline, and I'm looking for the reverse. So that one's probably not good. Economic weakness and the nuclear threat. This one is probably good. So usually what I want you to do is whenever you find an article that you find useful, do not click on it so that the page you are on refreshes to the page that you're jumping to. I always want you to open the link in a new tab. The reason is that you should think of this as your jumping off point, and these are your little branches that you're making off the single search. So economic decline and nuclear war, I have one right there. Let's see. Nuclear war could cause a global famine and kill who? Hold on. Who's nuclear warfare? Hopefully Lowe's. We'll get more. Economic impacts of a nuclear weapon detonation, probably not good. Energy shortages, economic unrest, and nuclear war. Look at this sentence right here. The crisis the world is facing, energy shortages, economic unrest, and the rising danger of a nuclear war is not without a reason. So that is probably good. Something I'm also looking at are the dates that these things were published in. So October 12th, that's recent. This one doesn't tell me the date, but if I look at it, does it tell me the date? 1999. This article sucks. All right. But yeah, a longer version of this is me looking at multiple Google searches. So it's like, if I think that I have exhausted this one, I've looked through all these articles. Usually the general rule that I follow is I keep going. I keep going every single article in this search term. I keep going until Google tells me more results. And the reason I do that is because I'm trying to get the most articles possible. So then after I find out, I've gotten all I've needed out of this, I create a new tab. I'm gonna go to Google, and I search up another one. So, financial crash and World War III. And I get more. From Economic Crisis to World War III by Jian Liu. And I believe that is an article that was read in the NATO topic last season. But it is still probably more relevant now. So here's another one, right? Got a lot of things. Has this one loaded? Okay. So y'all see the general Google searches, right? Cool. Another thing we can do is, for example, I know financial crash is also a key search term, so I can do economic decline or financial crash, and nuclear war, or World War III. So from here, I have multiple combinations. Economic decline and nuclear war, economic decline and World War III, financial crash and nuclear, or financial crash and World War III. I'm pulling up a bunch of combinations that allow me to get to the same point. So that is an example of Google searches. We'll stop this for now. Next one that I want to show you is Google Scholar. So those are general Google searches. You apply the general search terms, you're gonna get something eventually. Google Scholar is probably the one that I use the most just because I cut a lot of K literature for college. And so Google Scholar lets me search up a lot of scholarly articles about K stuff. So something that I was thinking about for this topic is, what is the topic's relation to settler colonialism? I'm not looking for UBI, I'm not looking for federal jobs guarantee, I'm not looking for Social Security. I'm also looking for a general link. Every single traditional policy app is going to do something with a tax and transfer policy, the fiscal redistribution part. So I search up tax and settler colonialism. Again, very general search. I'm not looking for anything specific right now. Tax and settler colonialism. First thing I get, taxes, taxpayers, and settler colonialism toward a critical fiscal sociology of taxes, white property. So there are a couple of things to look at when using Google Scholar. First thing is the actual article itself. If the article is available for free, usually it has this little link at the end. Again, remember, you open the link in a new tab. You let it load. Cool. It gives me the article. Gives me the whole thing. We see the abstract, right? We read it, see if the article is valuable, read through the article, yada, 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 right? Other thing I like to do is that once I'm done reading the article, if I think this article is really good and I want to cut more articles that say similar things or build off of it, I look at the citation list. Because look at the citation list. This thing is huge. That's a lot more articles I need to research and pull up. A lot of these are building off of general literature. So for example, one of the key authors for settler colonialism is Patrick Wolf. I want to see if Wolf is in here. Wolf is not in here. Another person is Tuck and Yang. I guess there's two authors, also not in here. So they're probably using a different theory of settler colonialism. But you can see they have Rifkin in here. Mark Rifkin is a common sequel author. Audra Simpson is another one. Is Coulthard here? No. But yeah, bunch of different citations, references, more articles to look at. Some of them are just about, settler colonialism broadly. Others are more connections between tax and settler colonialism. So that's one thing. Other thing to look at when using Google Scholar is this little thing here called cited by. When you look at this, it is going to give you more articles that are more recent than the one you have found. So when I click cited by, I get all the articles that have cited that specific article we were just looking at. So 2023, 2023, 2021, 2023, a bunch of really recent articles that you can use for your K literature. Land inequalities in the US, this is more of a theory of power card. Anti-indigenous policy formation, secular and neoliberal political advocacy, theory of power card, right? This one, not civilized enough to be taxed, indigeneity, citizenship, and the 1919 Alaska school tax. That sounds like a link to me, a general one if you want to cut it, right? So, a bunch of different things that you can do here. My laptop froze. Oh, there we go. So, this is an example. Most of these have their stuff, their links, and most of them are free, so that's good. But for right now, I do want to show y'all something. When you can't find an article for free, you go to a website called Sci-Hub, which is what we were talking about before. And in Sci-Hub, to get an article for free, it's going to ask you for a reference. Usually, a reference for an article you're trying to get stands in for DOI. Inside the article, or inside the homepage where you can find the article, you're going to find the DOI somewhere. It just takes a good eye to look to find it. So inside here, inside the actual article, we see the DOI all the way at the top at this corner. If I were to plug this DOI in here, and let's say the article was locked behind a paywall, 90% of the time, Sci-Hub will get you to open the article. You click open, and then it will get it for you. It's going to show up like this. It's going to show up blank sometimes. But if you click the save part, we give it some time. We're not going to wait the whole time because we are running late. But if we wait a little bit, it'll download, you open it, you get the article for free. So that's why you can use Sci-Hub. Next place we can try is Library Genesis. This is where you want to get books from. So, for example, Wilderson released a book called Afro-Pessimism in 2020. If I wanted to get Wilderson's book about Afro-Pessimism, I just search up Afro-Pessimism. It is not there,
I
no.
think you spelled that wrong.
I did spell it wrong. I was about to look like a noob. Here we go. All right. Afro-pessimism, right here, the first one. Frank B. Wooderson III, Afro-pessimism. Something to look at here is that in the mirrors portion, you have 1 and 2. You can click on either one. These are sort of like, so Library Genesis doesn't get taken down. Some of these will be fake links. Some of them will be real. You just gotta go through a trial and error process, and at some point, Library Genesis will give you the actual link to download the book. So usually it's 1. So if I click on 1, you see this part where it says get? I click on get, and then the book is downloading. I got it for free. I don't have to pay $60. Right here. Ta-da! Everything. Alright. Third place is academia.edu. If you can't find your articles on, for example, Google Scholar, you can go to academia.edu. Last thing I want to show you about Google Scholar is if we go back to tax and, actually we'll use another one. Here. So let's say I want to cut a racial capitalism critique. I put in the search right here because I already know the name of the article, but this article is called Mechanisms of the Racial Tax State. Again, there are ways that I can find articles that say similar things. I can go to the cited by portion. There are 39 articles that cite this article, which means they are going to have some relation to whatever this article is talking about. Another thing I want you to look at is you can go to the database that it comes from. So the thing I highlighted right here is the database that it comes from. It comes from Sage Journals. And the specific issue that it is in, or the specific journal, is the Critical Sociology Journal. So if I go to the website that it is from, Sage Journals, it is inside this Critical Sociology Journal, and it already has this here. Search this journal, enter search terms. So if I search up tax and racism to find similar articles, I might find something. Obviously, the one that I just found puts up on top, but then I also find certain articles like, capitalism, patriarchy, slavery, and racism in the age of digital capitalism and digital labor, right? A bunch of other more articles that are kind of related to tax, but this is an example of how inside one journal you can find a lot of things that say similar things as well, which means you have a plethora of places to search from. Yeah. Let's see. Jason, do you want me to cover the card coding part, or do you think people will do that in their lab?
I think you can go over it now.
Okay. All right.
Just preview it.
Card cutting time. So something that I do whenever I cut cards is whenever I'm searching for certain arguments, I always make sure I have a word bank because I'm always learning new terms. So for example, I first started off with economic decline, then I branched off to downturn, then crash, then global crash, then boom and bust cycle. We used other ones like financial crash, nuclear war, World War III, escalation, hotspot, right? A bunch of other terms that you can use to describe the same scenario, even just war. And then there's other scenarios like, for example, South China Sea conflict, NATO, Russia skirmish, right? Things like that. But always keep a word bank because it's useful to come back to if you ever find yourself forgetting certain ways to research. But for right now, after I'm done reading articles, I kind of figure out what the purpose of each card is. So we're gonna delete this one because I don't need to show you two examples. We're gonna cut this card that says impact. I need a card that says nuclear war equals extinction. This one sounds like it's pretty good for that. Nuclear war could cause a global famine and kill billions. Rutgers-led study finds. So what I'm going to do is, this article's pretty short, so I'm probably going to cut the entirety of it. I copy it. The document that I'm using here is called verbatim. If you're able to have a Microsoft Word, you should download it. The easy way to search it is verbatim paperless debate. You go to here. If you have a Windows or MacBook, it is available for both. And then Verbatim also has their own little timer in case you ever forget yours at a tournament. So PC or for Mac, whichever one, you have a timer. I'll show you the timer right here. Hold on. It'll pop up. Ta-da.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
I was wondering how far along you were in your lecture.
We're in like the last 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So, I'm not gonna show you the specific, like each little button that verbatim does, because that is something that you can figure it out on your own. But I do want to show you the basic parts of cutting a card. So, for example, let's copy the entire article because I want to cut this impact card. I'm going to paste it in, so I have all of this stuff and just, deformat it. Before I cut a card, I usually make the citation first because sometimes I forget, which is kind of bad, but all good. What's the first thing that you see in a citation after the tag?
The name.
The name, yeah. So Bruno, from what I see. The date, 22. After that, I put Greg Bruno is, and then I'll fill that out later because I can't see it right now. After that, what I put is the name of the article. After that, the place that publishes it, so Rutgers University. The date that it was published, so that is August 15, 2022. And then finally, the URL. Some people like to put the date that they accessed it. So for example, I would put date access July 25, 2023.
How deep are you?
10 minutes left.
2 minutes left.
Yeah, URL. If you want to put the date you accessed the article, fine. I honestly don't think it's too important. And then at the end, some people like to put their citation like initials. So for example, if I wanted to put mine in, if I wanted to be really basic, I would just put like my first name initial, my last name initial. Other people like to be creative, so for example, Curtis uses C-meow. Sometimes you might see Ladybug on there, right? I used to put Jay-Z. What do you put, Jason?
I just put my first name, Jason.
Jason, right? You can put whatever you want as long as it's like, if you want to be recognized for your work, or if your team does like card cutting assignments where you want to make sure that everybody is on top of their stuff, you can make it a rule that you have to put your initial in there so you can sort of keep people accountable. But I cut a lot of cards, I don't need to put my initials. But yeah, so after that, what I like to do is I deformat most of the site just because to me it's like this is what I need to read whenever I'm giving a speech. But last thing I need right here, Greg Bruno is, I need his qualifications. For sake and purposes, remember you want to figure out who this person is. There's no link to figuring out who Greg Bruno is. I would have to do a deep study about, Greg Bruno, Rutgers University, see if he's a professor, a student, etc. So all I'm going to put here is just Greg Bruno is a writer for Rutgers University right now. But obviously do a more detailed research to figure out why your author's qualified. And then that's it. After that, you would figure out your card cutting parts. So usually my rule is that whenever I think something is extremely important to read, I always put it in bold. So for example, even a nuclear conflict between new nuclear states would decimate crop production and result in widespread starvation. That's cool. I think I'll bolden that. More than 5 billion people would die of hunger following a full-scale nuclear war between US and Russia. Cool. According to a global study led by Rutgers climate scientists that estimates post-conflict crop production. Maybe, this is sort of just like qualifying the statement, so I would probably just underline it instead of bold. The data tells one thing: we must prevent a nuclear war from ever happening, said Allen, a distinguished professor of climate science in the Department of Environmental Science at Rutgers, blah, blah, blah. Building on past research, Zia Robic and their colleagues worked to calculate how much sunblocking spot windows of the atmosphere from firestorms would be ignited by the detonation of nuclear weapons. Researchers calculated. This is probably important to know why this article is like credible to talk about nuclear war, so I'll underline it. Underline tells me I don't necessarily need to highlight it, but if I ever need to reference it in cross-ticks, it's there. Let's see. Under even the smallest scenario, a localized war between India and Pakistan, global average caloric production decreased 7% within 5 years of the conflict. In the largest scenario tested, a full-scale US-Russian nuclear conflict, global average caloric production decreased by about 90% 3 to 4 years after fighting. That's probably important. Crop declines would be the most severe in the mid-high latitude, whatever. More area stuff. These changes would induce a catastrophic disruption in food markets that researchers conclude. Even a 7% would exceed the largest denominator recorded since the beginning, blah, blah, blah. Right, you get the gist. After that, you figure out what you need to underline, bolden, etc. You press the condense button if you want. And then after that, you shrink everything, and now it looks like a card. obviously you highlight it, or you give it to somebody else who didn't cut the card to highlight it. I would highlight it just because I cut the card. And then after that, I would just say, even the smallest nuclear war would cause massive famine, extinction. And that's it. I would highlight the card after, and then move on. But yeah, this lecture went 30 minutes than I intended. Sorry to your lab leaders. Are there any questions before y'all can go back to your lab?
So now, is this available on Chromebooks or no?
Another thing is, for verbatim on Chromebooks, there is a Google Docs extension that you can download. So in the same way that you can add, for example, I believe, what is it called? The citation machine on Google Docs. There is the exact same extension for verbatim on Google Docs. You just need to find it.
Thank you.
Other than that, thank y'all for this.
You know what it's called?
Verbatim. Yeah. Other than that, thank y'all for listening. You can go to your lab. Have fun.
That's how you do it. I definitely knew that. It's essential. And I really thought that we just did that, but